We're not used to thinking about things smarter than us. If you want to know what life's like when you're not the apex intelligence, ask a chicken. We have to face the possibility that unless we do something soon, we're near the end.
That is Geoffrey Hinton, the man who spent 50 years building the very foundation that modern AI runs on. He won a Nobel Prize for it, he worked inside Google for a decade, and now he's spending whatever time he has left warning us that the thing he helped create might end us. This is his forewarning.
In the past, new technologies have come in which didn't lead to joblessness. New jobs were created. So the classic example people use is automatic teller machines. When automatic teller machines came in, a lot of bank tellers didn't lose their jobs. They just got to do more interesting things. But here, I think this is more like when they got machines in the Industrial Revolution, and you can't have a job digging ditches now because a machine can dig ditches much better than you can. And I think for mundane intellectual labor, AI is just going to replace everybody. Now, it may well be in the form of you have fewer people using AI assistants. So it's a combination of a person and an AI assistant are now doing the work that 10 people could do previously.
People say that it will create new jobs though, so we'll be fine.
Yes, and that's been the case for other technologies, but this is a very different kind of technology. If it can do all mundane human intellectual labor, then what new jobs is it going to create? You'd have to be very skilled to have a job that it couldn't just do. So I don't think they're right. I think you can try and generalize from other technologies that have come in, like computers or automatic teller machines, but I think this is different.
People use this phrase, they say, AI won't take your job. A human using AI will take your job.
Yes, I think that's true. But for many jobs, that'll mean you need far fewer people. My niece answers letters of complaint to a health service. It used to take her 25 minutes. She'd read the complaint and she'd think how to reply and she'd write a letter. And now she just scans it into a chatbot and it writes the letter. She just checks the letter. Occasionally she tells it to revise it in some ways. The whole process takes her 5 minutes. That means she can answer 5 times as many letters. And that means they need 5 times fewer of her. So she can do the job that 5 of her used to do. Now, that will mean they need less people. In other jobs, like in healthcare, they're much more elastic. So if you could make doctors 5 times as efficient, we could all have 5 times as much healthcare for the same price. And that would be great. There's almost no limit to how much healthcare people can absorb. They always want more healthcare if there's no cost to it. There are jobs where you can make a person with an AI assistant much more efficient, and you won't lead to less people because you'll just have much more of that being done. But most jobs, I think, are not like that.
Am I right in thinking this sort of industrial revolution played a role in replacing muscles?
Yes, exactly.
And this revolution in AI replaces intelligence, the brain?
Yeah. So mundane intellectual labor is like having strong muscles, and it's not worth much anymore.
So muscles have been replaced. Now intelligence is being replaced.
Yeah.
So what remains?
Maybe for a while, some kinds of creativity. But the whole idea of superintelligence is nothing remains. These things will get to be better than us at everything.
See, this is the part people are not taking seriously enough. He is not talking about factory workers or truck drivers. He is talking about your niece, your paralegal, your graduate sitting in a call center. And he is saying 5 of them now do the work of 1 person with a chatbot, which means the other 4 just became unemployable.
What would you be saying to people about their career prospects in a world of superintelligence? What should we be thinking about?
In the meantime, I'd say it's going to be a long time before it's as good at physical manipulation as us.
Okay.
And so a good bet would be to be a plumber.
Until the humanoid robots show up. In such a world where there is mass joblessness, which is not something that you just predict, but this is something that Sam Altman at OpenAI, I've heard him predict, and many of the CEOs, Elon Musk, I watched an interview which I'll play on screen of him being asked this question. And it's very rare that you see Elon Musk silent for 12 seconds or whatever it was.
Right.
And then he basically says something about he actually is living in suspended disbelief, i.e. he's basically just not thinking about it.
When you think about advising your children on a career with so much that is changing, what do you tell them there's going to be of value?
Well, that is a tough question to answer. I would just say, to sort of follow their heart in terms of what they find interesting to do or fulfilling to do. I mean, if I think about it too hard, it frankly can be dispiriting and demotivating, because I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into building the companies, and then I'm like, should I be doing this? Because if I'm sacrificing time with friends and family, but then ultimately the AI can do all these things, does that make sense? I don't know. To some extent, I have to have deliberate suspension of disbelief in order to remain motivated. So I guess I would say just, work on things that you find interesting, fulfilling, and that contribute some good to the rest of society.
Yeah, a lot of these threats, it's very hard to, intellectually you can see the threat, but it's very hard to come to terms with it emotionally.
Yeah.
I haven't come to terms with it emotionally yet.
What do you mean by that?
I haven't come to terms with what the development of superintelligence could do to my children's future. I'm okay, I'm 77. I'm going to be out of here soon. But for my children and my younger friends, my nephews and nieces, and their children, I just don't like to think about what could happen.
Why?
Because it could be awful.
In what way?
Well, if I ever decided to take over, I mean, it would need people for a while to run the power stations until it designed better analog machines to run the power stations. There's so many ways it could get rid of people, all of which would, of course, be very nasty.
Is that part of the reason you do what you do now?
Yeah. I mean, I think we should be making a huge effort right now to try and figure out if we can develop it safely.
Are you concerned about the midterm impact potentially on your nephews and your kids in terms of their jobs as well?
Yeah, I'm concerned about all that.
Are there any particular industries that you think are most at risk? People talk about the creative industries a lot and it's sort of knowledge work. They talk about lawyers and accountants and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's why I mentioned plumbers. I think plumbers are less at risk.
Okay, I'm going to become a plumber.
Someone like a legal assistant, a paralegal, they're not going to be needed for very long.
And is there a wealth inequality issue here that will rise from this?
Yeah, I think in a society which shared out things fairly, if you get a big increase in productivity, everybody should be better off. But if you can replace lots of people by AIs, then the people who get replaced will be worse off, and the company that supplies the AIs will be much better off, and the company that uses the AIs. So it's going to increase the gap between rich and poor. And we know that if you look at that gap between rich and poor, that basically tells you how nice a society is. If you have a big gap, you get very nasty societies in which people live in walled communities and put other people in mass jails. It's not good to increase the gap between rich and poor.
The International Monetary Fund has expressed profound concerns that generative AI could cause massive labor disruptions and rising inequality, and has called for policies that prevent this from happening. I read that in the Business Insider. So
Have they given any idea of what the policies should look like?
No.
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, if AI can make everything much more efficient and get rid of people for most jobs, or have a person assisted by AI doing many, many people's work, it's not obvious what to do about it.
Universal basic income? Give everybody money?
Yeah, I think that's a good start, and it stops people starving. But for a lot of people, their dignity is tied up with their job. I mean, who you think you are is tied up with you doing this job, right?
Yeah.
And if we said, we'll give you the same money just to sit around, that would impact your dignity.
So even the man's own advice for survival comes with an expiry date attached. Be a plumber until the robots crawl under your house and do it cheaper. And the universal basic income answer he offers is not hope, it's just damage control for a society he already believes is going to fracture along wealth lines. The gap between rich and poor gets bigger, the society gets uglier, and the people who built this are insulated from all of it.
There's risks that come from people misusing AI.
Yeah.
And that's most of the risks and all of the short-term risks. And then there's risks that come from AI getting super smart and deciding it doesn't need us.
Is that a real risk?
And I talk mainly about that second risk because lots of people say, is that a real risk? And yes, it is. Now, we don't know how much of a risk it is. We've never been in that situation before. We've never had to deal with things smarter than us. So really the thing about that existential threat is that we have no idea how to deal with it. We have no idea what it's going to look like. And anybody who tells you they know just what's going to happen and how to deal with it, they're talking nonsense. So we don't know how to estimate the probabilities it'll replace us. Some people say it's like less than 1%. My friend Jan Lecan, who was a postdoc with me, thinks, no. We'll build them to be obedient. And other people, like Yudkowsky, say, no, these things are going to wipe us out for sure. If anybody builds it, it's going to wipe us all out. And he's confident of that. I think both of those positions are extreme. It's very hard to estimate the probabilities in between.
If you had to bet on who was right out of your two friends?
I simply don't know. So if I had to bet, I'd say the probabilities in between, and I don't know where to estimate it in between. I often say 10 to 20% chance they'll wipe us out. But that's just gut, based on the idea that we're still making them, and we're pretty ingenious. And the hope is that if enough smart people do enough research with enough resources, we'll figure out a way to build them so they'll never want to harm us.
Sometimes I think if we talk about that second path, sometimes I think about nuclear bombs and the invention of the atomic bomb and how it compares. Like, how is this different? Because the atomic bomb came along and I imagine a lot of people at that time thought our days are numbered.
Yes, I was there. We did.
Yeah, but we're still here.
We're still here, yes. So the atomic bomb was really only good for one thing, and it was very obvious how it worked. Even if you hadn't had the pictures of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was obvious that it was a very big bomb that was very dangerous. With AI, it's good for many, many things. It's going to be magnificent in healthcare and education, and more or less any industry that needs to use its data is going to be able to use it better with AI. So we're not going to stop the development. You know, people say, well, why don't we just stop it now? We're not going to stop it because it's too good for too many things. Also, we're not going to stop it because it's good for battle robots, and none of the countries that sell weapons are going to want to stop it. Like the European regulations, they have some regulations about AI, and it's good they have some regulations, but they're not designed to deal with most of the threats. And in particular, the European regulations have a clause in them that say, none of these regulations apply to military uses of AI. So governments are willing to regulate companies and people, but they're not willing to regulate themselves.
So his honest estimate is a 10 to 20% chance this technology wipes us out, and he admits that number is just his gut feeling because nobody actually knows how to calculate it. The regulations that exist have a carve-out that exempts the most dangerous use of all, military AI, which means the governments writing the rules have already decided they want no rules for themselves, and we cannot stop it because it is too profitable and too useful for warfare, which is the same reason we could not stop every other catastrophic technology in history.
I mean, my basic view is there's so many ways in which a superintelligence could get rid of us. It's not worth speculating about.
What is to stop
What
it?
you have to do is prevent it ever wanting to. That's what we should be doing research on. There's no way we're going to prevent it from... It's smarter than us, right? There's no way we're going to prevent it getting rid of us if it wants to. We're not used to thinking about things smarter than us. If you want to know what life's like when you're not the apex intelligence, ask a chicken.
Yeah, I was thinking of my dog Pablo, my French bulldog, this morning as I left home. He has no idea where I'm going. He has
Right.
no idea what I do.
Right.
I can't even talk to him.
Yeah. And the intelligence gap will be like that.
So you're telling me that if I'm Pablo, my French bulldog, I need to figure out a way to make my owner not wipe me out.
Yeah. So we have one example of that, which is mothers and babies. Evolution put a lot of work into that. Mothers are smarter than babies, but babies are in control. And they're in control because the mother just can't bear lots of hormones and things, but the mother just can't bear the sound of the baby crying.
Not all mothers.
Not all mothers. And then the baby's not in control and then bad things happen. We somehow need to figure out how to make them not want to take over. The analogy I often use is, forget about intelligence, just think about physical strength. Suppose you have a nice little tiger cub. It's sort of a bit bigger than a cat. It's really cute. It's very cuddly. very interesting to watch, except that you better be sure that when it grows up, it never wants to kill you, because if it ever wanted to kill you, you'd be dead in a few seconds.
And you're saying the AI we have now is the target cub?
Yep.
And it's growing up?
Yep.
So we need to train it when it's a baby?
Well, now a tiger has lots of innate stuff built in, so you know when it grows up, it's not a safe thing to have around.
But lions, people that have lions as pets,
Yes.
sometimes the lion is affectionate to its creator, but not to others.
Yes. And we don't know whether these AIs, we simply don't know whether we can make them not want to take over and not want to hurt us.
Do you think we can? Do you think it's possible to train
I don't know.
superintelligence?
I don't think it's clear that we can, so I think it might be hopeless. But I also think we might be able to. And it'd be sort of crazy if people went extinct because we couldn't be bothered to try.
If that's even a possibility, how do you feel about your life's work? Because you were...
Yeah. It sort of takes the edge off it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the idea is going to be wonderful in healthcare and wonderful in education and wonderful... I mean, it's going to make call centers much more efficient, though one worries a bit about what the people who are doing that job now do. It makes me sad. I don't feel particularly guilty about developing AI like 40 years ago, because at that time we had no idea that this stuff was going to happen this fast. We thought we had plenty of time to worry about things like that. When you can't get the AI to do much and you want to get it to do a little bit more, you don't worry about this stupid little thing is going to take over from people. You just want it to be able to do a little bit more of the things people can do. It's not like I knowingly did something thinking, this might wipe us all out, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Mhm.
But it is a bit sad that it's not just going to be something for good. So I feel I have a duty now to talk about the risks.
He just said it might be hopeless. Not a journalist, not a philosopher, the Nobel Prize winner who built the thing. And his only reason to keep trying is that going extinct because we didn't bother to try would be embarrassing, which is genuinely the most human and most terrifying framing of this problem I have ever heard.
I think we need people to tell governments that governments have to force the companies to use their resources to work on safety. And they're not doing much of that because you don't make profits that way.
One of your students we talked about earlier, Ilya?
Yep.
Ilya left OpenAI,
Yep.
and there was lots of conversation around the fact that he left because he had safety concerns. And are you hopeful?
I just don't know. I'm agnostic.
You must get in bed at night, and when you're thinking to yourself about probabilities of outcomes, there must be a bias in one direction, because there certainly is for me. I mean, imagine everyone listening now has a internal prediction that they might not say out loud, but of how they think it's going to play out.
I really don't know. I genuinely don't know. I think it's incredibly uncertain. When I'm feeling slightly depressed, I think people are toast. The AI is going to take over. When I'm feeling cheerful, I think we'll figure out a way.
So the safety work was promised, then quietly cut because it does not generate revenue. The most important person behind ChatGPT walked out over it, and the man who built the entire foundation of modern AI goes to bed some nights genuinely believing people are toast. Not as a metaphor, not for clicks, he just does not know if we make it through this. His best case is that enough smart people care enough to solve a problem nobody has ever solved. His worst case is that the companies kept cutting the safety budget until there was nothing left to cut, and we find out what that means the hard way. Subscribe, because this is not slowing down for anyone.